Well, we finally made it to our last glue up here on this planking. It's been a long road getting here. Of course, this is exactly when a lot of people would think that they're almost done. We're nowhere close to that. I'm really kind of curious to see where we're landing weight-wise. I've been carefully trying to track everything, although I think I might have omitted a few runs of planking when I was in the midst of the planking process on this side. I didn't mean to, but I think I just forgot to add a few in. I do know how many I cut initially, so I'm just going to check what I have left over against what I marked down, and hopefully they'll coincide. And of course there's all the epoxy. I'm tracking exactly how much I've used of that. Just going to leave sort of a bunch of the epoxy laid onto the back side of this here. I'm going to spread it out just so it doesn't kick off too quickly, but ultimately I need to have something to be able to grab for doing my edges. But it's always better to get the epoxy out of the pot as much as you can, because it's exothermic, which means it produces heat as it cures. The more heat it produces, the faster it cures. Go. That's the first one in place. I feel like every plank liberally covers my fingers in epoxy, so I always gotta do this quick little cleanup after each and every one. You notice I use this little twisting action as I drop that plank into place, and it's really just to ensure that I'm getting a nice little bit of squeeze out, and I'm also getting good contact across the surface of the planking as I slide it into position. Now, the last ones don't have an indexing hole, so I think I want to get these ones all in first, and then I'll come back and finish off those last ones. Okay, so now this is the portion that is now fully exposed. So I want to be careful about where I put any staples. Okay, well, here we go. This is all glued up. That's the last of our planking, and I know this looks like a total nightmare, but I assure you it's going to work out just fine. All my little bits of wood are waxed. They're going to come off just fine. And all this epoxy squeeze out, which I would love to just clean up right away, I'm not going to touch. I'm going to leave it alone. And after I pull all this stuff off, I can either use my heat gun and scraper to remove it, or I can just knock it off with my longboard. I'll probably do the latter, because what I find is with the heat gun, it does a great job of lifting off epoxy, but sometimes it'll actually lift it out of little crevices and things like that. And I really want all that epoxy to stay in any little holes that it happens to be sitting in. So better to just sand it all off. And after this is all cleaned off, I'm going to give the whole thing a skim coat with some thickened epoxy to fill all the little staple holes and crevices that got missed. So it's going to come out looking just fine in the end. So this stage of the planking job is basically over, which means I'm done fitting and gluing planks, and that feels really good. The next thing I got to move on to is actually fairing all of this out. But I'm very excited to get to this point, because this means very soon we're going to be looking at flipping this boat over and dealing with everything on the inside, and that's going to be pretty interesting stuff. For the most part, I am really happy with how well this worked out. The planking runs came to virtually a full width plank right here at the cutwater. I did not plan that out at all. That was a complete fluke. And I'm so glad it worked out that way. I had to add on just a sliver of more of a plank, and in the end, I think we'll be lucky if we see even like a, maybe an eighth of an inch of that at best. But that was really, really fortunate. I would have been annoyed to have it land with sort of half a plank right at the cutwater. I think that would have looked weird. But all in all, for my first cold molding experience, this has been a fairly positive one, I think. It'd be interesting to try it with lighter veneers. Certainly working with heavy veneers the way I have, I've made it more challenging in some ways. While the challenges were there, there's actually a positive aspect to that. And that is, once this boat is in service, having a heavy surface veneer or heavy face veneer like that means that this boat has an opportunity for, a wooding or two without worrying about it. If this was a real thin veneer like you get in a sheet of plywood, boy, you got to be really careful about what you want to do with it in the future. One sanding and you could suddenly be burning through one of your veneers, and that would not be good. So this really is going to be good for the lifetime of the boat. And worst case scenario is if you felt like you were getting too thin on that face veneer, you could scrub the hull down and you could give it a coat of glass. It's going to put a bit of weight onto it, at least a little bit, but you could go that route. After all, in the lifetime of a boat, the nature of the boat sometimes changes. As it gets older and weaker, you need to do things to sort of bring it back to life. So that is one of the options. I just wanted to see how those glue lines came out. See if I need to do anything about it. These guys are fine. Yeah, I don't totally love this one up the middle here. I think I just might go with my little wooden spline just taking it from the water line right through to the stem. Just a little 1/4 inch strip up the middle to clean that up. I think that's worth doing. So what we'll do is we're going to cut a little channel up through here, and it's only got to go from up here, which is below the water line, to the very end. So something like this, and I'll try and just make it real small, like 1/8 of an inch, and we'll see how that works out. If this little thin one doesn't work out, then I can always go up to, say, 1/4 inch or 3/16 or something like that. But the big trick now is how to cut that cleanly. And I think, as much as I cannot stand the idea of doing it, I think a router is the best way to go, because this is just such a hard surface to work on. And of course, it's all filled with epoxy now, so trying to do it with hand tools would be really challenging. So I think what I'm going to do is we need to create something to guide our router. So I'm going to use a small laminate trimmer here with I've got this 1/8 inch box core bit, which is basically a little rounded slot bit. And and I've got a little collet on my router here. So I need to set up something that the router can follow as a guide. So I'm going to figure out a way to do that. Now, of course, the big challenge is how do I attach a guide to this? Below the load water line, I can put holes in here, and I even have holes in here from doing the glue up. And then I've got the face of the stem here to work with. So I'm going to create basically a platform that laminate trimmer can ride on that will help me to cut that slot. So the first thing I need to do, though, is I need this little angle right here, because I need to be able to fasten something on here. I need some blocking, and I want that blocking to approximate at this angle right here. So I'm just going to take this and find a piece of scrap, and we're going to go cut it to match this angle right here. Okay, I've got my bit of blocking here. I've drawn my angle on it, and I'm just going to cut it on the bandsaw. No, it really wants to go this way. It's a little bit frustrating. Okay, we can do that. Actually, this is a good place to use the fence.
With that wedge screwed to the stem, we now have a nice solid platform to work on.
Okay. Try that. Ideally, I really want some blocking over here. Let's stick something in there for blocking. Should staple that on maybe. That's good. It's really hard for me to see. Okay, and here as I can tell, that is landing nicely on the center line. So I'm going to do a very shallow cut to start with, and then we'll see how that looks. This makes me a little nervous having this a bit flippity floppy over here. It's like landing right on the glue line on one side, so it's really hard to judge if I did a good job or not. Yeah, I think so. Okay, so we're gonna drop the depth of that cut a little.
Papa,
Yep.
where's the chocolate?
Excuse me?
Where's the chocolate?
There's what chocolate?
Annika said there was chocolate down here.
Did she?
Yeah, she did.
Liar.
Hey, Mom.
Here we go. Perfect. Well, I like that trick with the spline so much, I decided to use it as well on the counter. Now that seam looked pretty good back there, but this is going to really tie it all together. We're going to wrap this episode up here, folks. Now please come back and join us, and next time we're going to scrub down this hull and give ourselves a first taste of what it will look like with varnish on it. So don't forget to subscribe, join us on Patreon if you can, and I will see you later.